You
I
preach
have no
sinistry.
illusions. I have no illusions about the depravity of human beings. Human people are just wicked, lying, thieving, self-deceiving, just trash.
Yeah, that was something I really was, and I need to finish this because I did get halfway through it
Oh, okay.
before I
How are
went to
you
bed. But
liking it
yeah,
so far? It's so
yeah,
good.
there were some key points in it that were very interesting. That like I saw some similar parallels with this like type of maybe not stoicism, but like understanding that there it's hitting like the point that you're kind of like alluding to here, like that there's almost like a type of set of sins like that we're not even that like aware of,
Yep.
um, because of our like the way the Buddhists would call it, because of your um not untrainedness, but you're like you don't have not control, unskilled, like being unskilled in a sense is like a type of sin that they discuss. And like here there are sins like that will manifest as a result of being unskilled.
Yeah.
He didn't put it like that. He said liberty to sin, rebellion against the rules, unreal confession. Or was it? I think it was in part or page 12. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. It was like you had to like that the bare state, the baseline state is like inherently unskilled. Um let's see here.
Is it chapter 4 or chapter 5? Page 12.
I think it might have been before it. Oh wait, yeah, he was talking about something. He was talking about a ladder, I want to say. He was talking about a
Yep.
ladder.
Spiritual ladder. This becomes in a very important motif because Saint Teresa of Lisieux is also going to talk about this.
And like that's really like a like the bigger dangers like it can be more hidden, so people will think it's like okay, and like they'll make that like their mainline way of like functioning in the world, but
Did you
unbeknownst
learn
to
what you're
them.
saying at church, or is this just nonsense you made up?
Hey, what's up, Corey, bro? Are you actually a Catholic or are you Protestant?
I'm not Catholic or Protestant.
Okay, no, yeah, so this is a 12 degrees of humility and pride by Saint Bernard.
I don't know who Saint Bernard is.
No, what was that baby shooting into that guy's eyes?
No, that's milk that's being shot from Mary's boob into his eye.
What the?
This is one of his
Mary
canonical
would never.
miracles. He had like an eye infection or something that kept him from seeing. And then he says that when he looked up into like the photo, like the painting of Mary, like milk squirted from her breast into his eye, and it healed his eye.
Mother's milk. Well, not even just regular mother's milk.
It's
Dude,
not
that's got to be
funny.
the craziest shit I've heard in my entire life, bro. I can't lie.
That's his
It's not
canonical
funny, bro.
miracle.
It's not funny.
Okay, I got a question for the Catholics.
Oh, we're in the middle of something.
All right, all right, all right.
Okay.
So you're saying it's on chat on page 12?
Oh yeah, I'm back.
Or are you
I
going
want to
through
go
right
take a
now?
leak.
But
No, it might have been a little bit earlier. He was mentioning a ladder. Oh, actually, no. There, he does mention. Let me just
Jacob's
control
ladder.
F this.
look, they are weak with those who are weak. With those who are offended, they burn. They have made it their habit to rejoice with them that rejoice and weep with them that weep. When their spiritual vision has been made clear and acute by this brotherly love, they delight to gaze on truth for its own sake, and their affection for it they are indulgent towards errors which are not their own. But how can those who, so far from thus associating themselves with their brethren, insult them in their sorrow and deride them in their joy, possibly discern truth in their neighbors, seeing that they cannot enter into the feelings of others about things which they have no personal experience? Well, indeed, does the common saying fit them. A healthy man has no idea of the feelings of one who is ill, nor does a well-fed man realize what a hungry man suffers. A sick man feels for the sick, and the hungry for the hungry, with familiarity the greater as his own condition approaches theirs. For as pure truth can be discerned only by one whose heart is so pure, so can the sorrow of a brother be most truly felt by one whose heart is sad. But if your heart is to be saddened by the sorrows of others, you must recognize your own evil state, which you may see reproduced in your neighbor, and may thus know how to help him.
I actually like that quote a lot. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Let's see this a little bit before.
Oh, here it is. I found it. It was on page 7, and it was about. It actually was using the dinner analogy, where and love is rightly called a central course because beginners are unable,
Yeah,
through
yeah.
their timidity, to take advantage of its sweetness, while those who have arrived at maturity, it is an insufficient substitute for the deeper delight of full vision. Like, maybe I'm like extrapolating too much from it, but
No, read the whole paragraph first.
all
It's
right,
just
let
the
me go
main
back.
idea.
Um, the first still required to be cleansed by a very bitter dose of fear from the pestilent poison of fleshly lust, and have not yet discovered the sweetness of milk. The latter have already turned away from milk and are reveling in the delight derived from their entrance into glory. Those only in the middle who are on the journey have found some delicious little morsels of love, with which, owing to their weak digestion, they so far have to be content. So the first course is humility, purifying by its bitterness. The second is love, comforting by its sweetness, and the third is the full vision, which is secure in its strength. That was the part that like really hit me like a train that I wanted to make a note of. And like this whole thing is like, going back to the state of a ladder, where like at the beginning you're starting out on humility, and then like in the center, once you've ascended some bit, you're being purified by the bitterness, so to speak. um but when you reach at the top, like you have full vision, you kind of like ascend the more superficial stuff, and you have like
Yep.
the security and like the full strength of like this righteousness, or like this path that you've gone unto. So like if that's the case, then imagine like when you're not even trying to be, you're not trying to go up and down this ladder, right? Like when like the ladder isn't even there for you, and you're just in a
Pe-
complete baseline state of sin, and you're like full on deluded.
People mistake humility as being the thing that you're supposed to achieve. That's why he writes this in a monastic context. So there's a lot of practical wisdom that he's trying to give, like in this type of spiritual writing, because he writes this to, he's like the head of like a monastery, and he writes this thing to like another monastic abbot that's starting his own convent or monastery. So this is like his guidance to him. Like where it applies for us is like, when people think about like, oh, like um, oh, like I like monks, or like, I looked into the spiritual life because, where my life is at right now, and it's just like I wanna like move like in a more spiritually authentic direction, and all they can see, is they want to become more humble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what Saint Bernard is saying is that that's only the beginning step of the ladder. So a lot of people mistake, like especially spiritual quote unquote novices that don't have experience. That's just with like looking deeper and looking into their own psyche, is they just look at humility as the end goal when it's really not. And he's giving like he's trying to explain his wisdom why it's not.
Yeah. Grudgin, what is the Protestant view of all of this?
Like, you know,
Oh,
like
sorry, go on.
especially nowadays, like whether it's a Catholic church or any church or anyone that is looking from the outside into religious people, and they're always like, "Oh, you're just not humble enough."
Yeah.
Or a lot of times that's just projection. Because in a monastic context, he's an abbot and he sees this all the time from new novices that are coming in. And I don't know if you've ever been, I mean, you probably haven't been in like a setting or situation like that. But when you're with other Christians and you're all trying to live the life of Christ and stuff, you start to pick out, people start to irritate you because you're like, I'm trying to be humble in this way and I don't see this other guy even trying. At least that's what it looks like from my angle. But this kind of
Yeah.
like pettiness that's happening between people who are supposed to like be shared in the life, and you'll notice like the monks though, like the old monks, like they're in a completely different zone. It's not like they don't know that the pettiness is happening, but it's like the pettiness really doesn't matter to them as much. But for the people that are still stuck at this level, they're stuck in that pettiness of trying to judge each other by their humility.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the journey, so he's not giving a criterion of like judging people. But if people are still stuck there being petty about spiritual stuff like that, then that means that they haven't gone to the next level, which is they should have joy. It shouldn't affect them. Joyful in the fact that I don't have to rely on my own pettiness about what I see in other people's, because those are all just reflections of my lack of humility. And then as you begin to overcome those things yourself within a monastic context, he's trying to give like a overall wisdom view of how this shit plays out in a monastic context. I hope you can imagine, right? It's
Yeah, I can imagine.
so the community itself is important for this, but it's good for the abbot to know that this is going to happen, but that it's all part of the process, even for each individual person. And part of what allows that for to happen is the pettiness that kind of goes through it until people realize this and can move past it.
Yeah.
Because the other person becomes an opportunity by which you can project onto them and they can project onto you, right?
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah.
you're,
There's like a method to that madness.
yeah. Again, he's speaking from the perspective of being a monastic abbot. So, and then as you overcome those, it becomes joy to you, right? To revel in the fact that, hey, I overcame this in myself. When I look at my other brothers who are still, I can understand why they. Personally, myself, I don't know if I'm still at the humility stage or just at the end of the humility stage and onto joy, because I still feel a lot of resentment for the pettiness that happens. I'd like to see myself as, oh, like I'm in the full vision sense of like, oh, I can like see everybody and see the reasons why they're joyful. But like I know like I'm always sucked back into like getting pissed off at people for having the pettiness in the first place.
I think that's because your journey so far um is like still like these people that are going all the way up the ladder, so to speak, like they're at a completely different phase. Like they're in a monastery or in a church somewhere,
Yeah.
and they're devoting like their free time to like doing this sort of thing and cultivating this, whereas your journey right now is like having an online community and talking to people of like various backgrounds,
Yeah,
either other
I'm in the
Catholics,
world. Just
Protestants,
this time.
atheists, and like so it's going to be more difficult, I think, to traverse it when like the focus is going to be different.
Yeah. I like it here though, and maybe that's bad. I don't know.
No, dude, I think this is one benefit that Christianity does have over like the Eastern philosophies is like that there is like multiple missions that you can have. So like in the case of like you can always bring this guy up, but William Lane Craig is like his like maybe I wouldn't know this, but like you could look at it as though God's mission for him is to be as close as like a modern Aquinas when it comes to apologetics and arguing for the existence of God and defending the faith, right? And then like there's other people who's maybe like their Christian mission is to do works like for the community and to do the like I think that that is one benefit that Christianity does have over like Eastern philosophies is that you can it's not necessarily clear like that there is like a one and only way that you need to be operating as a Christian for you to be a successful Christian. It's like that you can have like this side objective where it's like I want to do more apologetics or I want to be more like involved with volunteering work and joining like the Christian equivalent of the Peace Corps or I want to do missionary work or I want to try and protect the church like against like bad actors that are trying to co-opt it and decay it or something. Like there's different missions that are all valid.
Yeah,
I think that is like the one of the greatest strengths that Christianity has going for it.
I guess.
What do you think, Rojan?
Oh, you guys are saying a lot.
Grudgin, you should read this too. I feel like both of you guys are like this is I mean, I know I've had conversations with Grudgin and you. Like Grudgin, let me send you this because you should read this too in your own time. I mean, near and far, are you enjoying this? Like kind of like the deep like morsels that it has.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know if like you okay. Like
I would say I've been on the battlefield for some 18 years now. I've dealt with every human of every degree of stupidity or genius, pride and covetousness,
check this out, Grudgin. You should read this
believers of
with us. I mean, in your own
multi-levels of
time.
unrighteousness or wisdom. It's just, you have to account for each individual as they come. And I try to remain merciful. Even there's believers that I find extremely repugnant. And even them I have mercy on and I don't act out. Although when people do, like Abysmal, it is funny because it's kind of justified. I'm just not the one to always give it to them, even though they deserve it. Even still,
Let's add this to the schema then.
I should. I'm curious actually if they've got something from me. Oh, oh, yeah, it would be nice. I'm down.
But this is the thing. The whole point of humility is the first step, but it's to bring you to the truth. And you can only I and revel in the fullness of their joy, where I know I need no longer speak in the bitterness of my heart, but may say to God, condemn me not. If while I feast on the unleavened bread of sincerity and of truth, so the humility should lead one to sincerity and truth, right? To seek what is truthful and sincere in either the shortcomings and the pettiness that you find in yourself or that you see in those others or you perceive to see in others. If you truly seek the sincerity and the truth of it all, then you'll sing joyously in the paths of the Lord, for great is the glory of the Lord. Yet good also is the path of humility, for it by truth is sought, love is reached, and a share of the fruits of wisdom is obtained. As in a way Christ is the end of the law, so is he the perfection of humility and the final apprehension of truth, philosophy. Christ, when he came, brought grace. Truth gives grace to those to whom it has become known. But as it is by the humble that it is known, it is to them that it gives grace. Yeah, this is just the philosophy part.
Can you send me some of the background information on the that leads up to the discussion about whether or not there can be the Pope can be a formal heretic? Like there's like a lot of first council or second council, things like that being thrown around.
You mean like the Third Council of Constantinople itself?
Yeah, or just like everything that is related to that roadmap.
Yeah, like when we're talking about believers, all of them, right? Protestants, non-denom, crazy people, Catholics, Orthodox. I get the fact that we have an impulse to want to draw believers to see the truth, and like I'm not Abysmal, obviously. Abysmal, he's a scribe, straight up. Me, what am I? You know what I mean? But everyone else, like everyone, you have something. We're called to feed the sheep, bring them closer to God, and we're trying to do it in the way that we think is best. I consider this, consider everyone's words constantly. And I guess the only thing I take offense to is evil. So when like your saint was talking earlier, how he said that it was a lack of like humbling themselves and seeing things that they weren't meeting a certain standard of God that they've already achieved. It's not necessarily a lack of humility, in my opinion. It's more that, or from the saint's point of view, like I wouldn't say that when I'm afflicted, there's a lack of humility in me. I feel like I try to act on that as much as possible. It's more like God calls us to hate evil. And when I see those who have the truth and should know better, I'm all the more angry at them. As opposed to like an unbeliever he's just clueless. It's like easier to forgive them. But that's why it says like in Matthew 23, it's like you are the sons of your fathers. You've seen what they've done and you still followed in their footsteps. Double condemnation upon your head. For you knew better.
Yeah, no. That's I think that's right. Like that that's precisely why like it was so grave that the angels kind of rebelled, right? Cuz unlike humans, because we live in the physical world, we can't see like God's face in a physical sense. Like during our waking human life, and only gets shown once you're in the afterlife in heaven with God. Whereas like the angels are automatically like de facto able to experience heaven and see God's like full grace, power, like all of his, being, and still, knowing all of this, deciding to like turn away and rebel, like it's just on a whole different level of like retarded.
Yeah. So it's like when it comes to the things that we've mastered, when it comes to knowledge and understanding, I see Jesus and the apostles constantly compelling us to master our heart, to discipline ourselves in times where we're tested. Like, for instance, we read earlier today, Matthew 11 came up, right? And they were using it against Mary, but I thought the more important thing, besides the whole Mary thing, was the fact that Jesus, once again, in this position, pointed towards the Word of God and keeping his words and his sayings, which he's always done all the way throughout. He redirects and points towards God and his Word. So it says, and it came to pass, as he spake these things, a certain woman of the company lifted up her voice. So there was a woman. She lifted up her voice and said unto Jesus, Blessed is the womb that bare thee, and the paps which thou hast sucked. Like, blessed is the womb, right? Blessed is Mary. I don't have an issue with that, to be honest. But then Jesus says, Yea, rather, blessed are they that hear the word of God and keep it. And at every point when there was attention on him, he redirected. Whenever there was attention on others, again with Mary at that one point where, like, your mother and your sister are here and they want to talk to you. And he's like, Who is my mother, my sister, my brother? Those that do the will of my Father, those are my brothers and sisters. So again, he redirects back to the Father, continuing to keep his commandments, keep his word, keep righteousness in your mind and in your heart. Everything in Proverbs speaks of it. And I feel like when we go in search of the scriptures, like when Paul said it's to know the perfect will of God that we may better serve, to know his will, what is good and evil, to take the cloak off even more every day. The cloak that we still have over our own actions and others who are so quickly to blame other believers. And we should be more prudent. Because in the end, we're going to be judged by our works and we'll receive our portion in the end. And whatever amount you chose to do in your life will be on you.
This is what I mean. Like, this is what I really. Oh man, this is not gonna. I don't know how heretical this is, but on one of my shroom trips, it became kind of obvious to me how like there's an intelligence and like you're always in the right place, or like the things that happen to you is for a reason. And this what began like the kind of like the hamster wheel started going about God being like a real thing. And so last year, I think I already mentioned this before, I made it a project with a buddy of mine to start through cultivating the skill of reading. And we were reading like some of the, great literature works. Like we'd cover one book like every week or every 2 weeks, depending how big it was. And now it's like, even though I'm getting hit with all of this stuff, like I have cultivated like that experience has directly like cultivated my ability to be able to meaningfully be able to go through all of this stuff.
Hmm.
So it's like I was like one way you could put it is like I was on that path so I could be able to go through and read through all this. Yeah, Grudgin, what do you think?
I think that I had to endure listening to Irish debate for like an hour and a half earlier today. And it was so disgusting. I was so disgusted. And like, she brought me to a point where I literally thought in my mind, like, I wish God would just throw everyone and me in the lake and just be done with it because of how awful she was. It was so awful. Yeah, she just wasn't hearing anyone out. It didn't matter. I
Our
mean,
Lord.
I was about to unmute my mic and be like, why are you guys even debating here? Like, she's literally in a position that if the Pope becomes the devil himself, she still won't turn. Like, what are you like hoping for? Like that she's just gonna like become a Protestant? Yeah, I would say from like a Protestant trying to convince a Catholic to convert to Protestantism, it's kind of futile.
Why?
Mainly, I would say because no matter what argument you come up with to prove that you have the right interpretation of this and that your church fathers are wrong, because they believe in apostolic succession, that the Holy Spirit, God, and all this was happening, that this is obviously a direct result of God's, by God's hand, that this interpretation came about. So it's like, from their standpoint, it's like, well, you're kind of going against God entirely because this is God's interpretation. And where Protestants are like, well, no, it's not. It's man's, and everything got skewed and crazy at some point. So it doesn't even matter, it seems like.
No, man, it does matter. Like, I forgot what the term is called that Bismo
It's
used,
like a
but it's
steel
like,
man, though. Like, you can't.
it's like the words in a book or anything, any type of media. It can is like it can be fallible. However, the interpretation that this thing is trying to portray, or like the concepts that it's like putting out there, like there can be an objective, infallible interpretation of that. Like, and that was pretty interesting. Is like how you could basically have like a Bible, have it be inherently like fallible just by itself, but then different groups of people are reading it, and a lot of these interpretations are like wrong, and yet they're gonna have holes and they're gonna be fallible. But then
Sure.
there is a way.
It's been dogmatized. It's already concrete. Like,
Yeah, but like
maybe if I was there like 1800 years ago, but
what if you time traveled and you
uh,
saw like Jesus in the flesh, and he said, "I know who you are." Like he used like the gift of tongues to speak English to you. That's how you know. And he's like, "Come home to the Catholic Church," and then he like sends you back into the future. Like, what would you do?
Shit my pants.
if I want to see God, all I have to do is be pure in heart. So, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Whoa, grudgin, reading the Bible again.
No, but
What?
the point that I was getting to, Rajan, was that it's interesting that you can uh basically that there's like an objective,
Mm,
infallible interpretation that can be
definitely,
discovered, and that
definitely.
this is like I think is what like the Catholic Church would have going for them, is like the ability to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Because you could probably work it backwards and come up with like other interpretations and see how it compares. And if it's like objectively infallible, you shouldn't be able to poke holes in it. It should be completely like um I don't know, like the ontological traits of that interpretation, but it should be able to like stand like all of your tests.
Right. Well, what can you accuse a Protestant of that he won't outright deny also? Oh, money preachers. Like, okay, most Christians on the Protestant side say they're the demonic. Like, I rarely see Protestants placed in a position where they have to justify these quote unquote necessary evils or other things. Like idolatry and things like that. They don't have to justify that. They don't have to sit there and go through hoops to convince anyone. Um, Again, if you can get accused of Protestant of things, by all means, I'd like to hear some. Like, it's kind of like the Muslims in Aisha. Like, you got that situation.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, uh, why is that even on the table? Like, Protestants are a little bit more devoid of these type of accusations. I'm trying to think what they're guilty of, but even the things that they point at, the majority of believers denounce those things already.
Yeah, so if you're talking about like some type of like moral issue that you could look at Protestants and point them at, I don't think there's like a clearly like a complete obvious one. I think they're the danger of like Protestantism is like if there is an objectively true, infallible interpretation to get
Amen.
out of the Bible, uh, then it's not necessarily clear like that the Protestant side is going to be properly equipped to be able to discover it. But I mean, in that case, you might as well try and be like an all-in-one Christian, where you're like going to the Catholics, and you're going to the Baptists and the Lutherans, and you're talking to all of them and seeing like what they're all saying. But you might just confuse the shit out of yourself if you do something like this.
For starters, why is it necessary that we uncover every single mystery possible and label it and dogmatize it? That this is it. Because at some point, because of the ambiguity and things like that, we're reaching into revelation to justify prayers to saints. Like, we're dipping in a prophecy to do this when this literally barely says anything about upkeep of virtue and following God. More has to do with future events, but we're going to dip into it. Okay. Jump through some hoops in the Old Testament to try and justify things. Protestants don't really have that issue. They don't really need to justify the things because they stick so closely to what the plain text literally says. I'd like to see a Catholic accuse them of reading into the text and stuff like that. If there's arguments, I'd like to see some, but it seems like the Protestants are in a position where they're the judge, right? The Catholics are the ones being accused of a bunch of things. But I don't side completely with Protestants on some things. There's things that they have wrong, but just being honest.
Yeah.
I don't bring up, and I don't debate these things with you guys. I mean, I think you
No,
already
man,
know that.
no, you're fine, man. But yeah, I think like the I mean, the big ones, right, is going to be things like the doctrine of the Eucharist, the authority of Scripture, by itself. That those are going to be or like the sacraments, like confession and stuff.
I could live with the
Um,
Eucharist. It's just, why can't it be multifaceted? Why can't there be a deeper underlying message being said there? Which I believe there is. But to say, no, it's only about communion, that's when I can't become Catholic. If you're going to place me in a position where it's either this only, I'm like, okay, I could believe that. I don't disagree with that. I could believe, I've read the saints and what they've said about the Holy Eucharist. I could totally hop on board with that. I have no issue. But when you say Christ isn't also talking about keeping the Father's commandments and his words in John chapter 6, and it's simply only pointing towards communion, that's where I have a problem. Because I do think it's more than that.
Abismo, what do you think?
And I could literally go through all four Gospels, and at every point Jesus spoke, he is always pointing towards doing the Father's will. I don't know how many times I know. It should be accepted with open arms, but it's not. It's shut down because they're afraid. I'm like, what do you need to be afraid about?
Do you think
Like,
they're afraid of like losing control?
like they're calling me to communion, and I'm calling them to righteousness and God's will. Like, how am I in the wrong?
I think it's not like as much of a dichotomy like that. Like
It doesn't have to
when
be.
you,
They make it that way. It doesn't need to be. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, when I was like probing Epiphatics' mind about this a bit, if I could oversimplify what he was kind of saying, it's like when you're being righteous and you're trying to really be sincere in your cultivating a relationship with God and following and accepting Christ, um, that naturally the wanting to do the works, wanting to do this, the sacraments and holding them to be sacred, like that this is what is good for you, and like that these things will be emergent as a result. Um, and this would be like the difference between like a person when you're looking at like confession, one person that like isn't actually sincere in their faith and they're just doing the sacraments and like they just do the confession and they get out and they start sinning all like automatically again and it's like a rinse and repeat back and forth. Whereas if you're doing like the first part, you're being sincere, you really believe in Christ, and you really want to cultivate this relationship with God and at a deep level, um not only are you going to want to do the confession, but after you do it, you're not going to like do this rigmarole immediately, fucking up and using it as a get out of jail free card. Like you're gonna want to use it to kind of like be in to have the grace and to ultimately like evolve past that sin like that you keep falling towards. So like in the example of two people, let's say there's two Catholics and they're both like serial gooners. All they do is like watch porn. And one of them's like, "Oh shit, I've done it too much. Let me go get the confession, and I'll restart." But the other one is like, "Fuck, I really need to get rid of this. I need to stop this, And he's being sincere. He's asking, God for help. He's praying to Jesus, and he does the confession. And he's like, from here on out, like I'm gonna do everything in my power to not fall to this, to not succumb to right? Like these are completely different perspectives. So it's like I think there's like that bit where it's not like the separate dichotomy where you are if you don't do the sacraments, like you're fucked. I don't think it's like that. It's like that when you are really trying your hardest and you're like the most sincere type of Christian, that you will do the sacrament. Like that shit will come out as a consequence of like like that seems to be like the what I get from like hearing other Catholics or the Orthodox talk about it. Like that seems to be what they're putting down.
Serial
You,
gooners.
what do
It's
you
no
think,
biggie
Abysmal?
though. It's I don't really like bringing up these things. I mean, because I don't think it's that important. And what's up? Yeah, because I know how it feels to have people dunk or try to you know talk bad about Protestants, and it affects me. So I don't like talking about Catholicism in front of the Catholic boys because I don't want them to be bitter towards me or anything like that.
I think you shouldn't take it like personal in that way. I think you should look at like there's always like a useful amount of critiquing. Like this is the difference between like a Bismo and fight, where um where fight will look at the Pope as like the sacred guy that he can't be wrong, and he should be unchallenged. Whereas like a Bismo, like he understands like that there could be some issue where like the Pope can be a formal heretic, and like that there's going to be ramifications, like possible ramifications as a result of this.
Uh-huh.
And so even though they're both like effectively on the same team, having like this discussion um is important, right? Like it's going to sharpen like these two different perspectives. It's going to allow you to kind of like see the different issues like that might need attending to, so to speak, and to address. And the difference with that whole like Protestantism and Catholicism, maybe there's something if that you think like the Catholics are too tunnel visioned on, that you think like they're not like like there's always something to be kind of gained.
They're steel manned, I would say, because of the saints and the church fathers. I mean, it's how do you like I mean, once you already believe that the interpretation literally came directly from God through these church fathers, like that's it. That's the end of the argument. Like, what can you do? You could like show a logical like interpretation and back it up with just 100 verses. It still won't matter in the end.
Beastius, what do you think?
But you have to trust the church. You have to put your faith in what those men were doing was true and right, and they're obviously they had good intentions. And I mean, which is